My name is Akinmejiwa Oluyemi Walter, and the assessment given to us. I will listening to the voices of my students through asking them the four questions impact my planning. It will really have impact on my planning because, for example, the first question, if I ask them, can you name two adults who can believe you will be a success in life? It's talking about the social emotional development. It's where we need to ask themselves because if I'm planning, I need to know where the level of my students, what they are capable of doing, and what they are not. I need to know their level of understanding. So by asking them, definitely so then we need to think within himself or ourselves. If two adults can boldly come out that you can be successful, you're successful in life, definitely they have seen you walking towards that direction. Because if I just ask them where the adult can testify that you can do better, definitely you are working towards that your goal. Also, if they ask another question, where are you going with your learning? Are you just doing it for fun? If you never learn the student, we need to think. All these questions, their feedback will let me know how to plan. Will let me know where to start. Will let me know the level at which they are. Whether I need to start from the simplest, whether I need to start from the fundamental when planning. Because teaching starts from planning. And also, if I should ask number three, how are you going with your learning? And where are you going next? Are you even going to live where you are? Are you working towards or going higher? Is about social emotional development. Because if I don't listen to these voices of my students, definitely I will just be planning out of it. I'll just be planning out of what they have. The moment I know who they are, I'll definitely know how to plan. And also, let me just go to the second question. What is the connection between assessment for learning and planning for teaching and learning? Let me start with the definition of assessment. Assessment is an integral part of learning. Good assessment takes into account learning styles, the strengths, and the needs. It is flexible and reflects student achievement against a set criteria, not against students. Effective assessment takes place over time and varied in its approach. Let me just tell you, assessment is not an add-on and is not a teacher-centered. Assessment is part of planning. That means it's an ongoing part of every day. For me as a teacher, assessment is the process of gathering information about students' learning that informs my teaching. To my students, assessment is the process that informs them about their learning. Most often, this feedback is done through formative assessment strategies. Also, when planning, I need to identify the purpose of assessment. Assessment for learning directly influences student learning by reinforcing the connection between assessment and instruction. Assessment for learning occurs as a part of everyday teaching and learning and uses information from ongoing assessment to shape classroom teaching and learning. Assessment as learning puts the students, my students, in an active role of learners, using assessment information to self-assess, regulate, and monitor their learning progress. Effective assessment practices are responsible to the strength, needs, and clearly articulated learning destination. Also, when planning, I need to decide what effective assessment looks like. There are several things that are visible in my classroom where effective assessment is taking place. One, clear criteria for specific learning targets and goals. I get to what each grade are visible around the classroom. Words, pictures, illustration, or other exemplar of students' work are posted around my classroom. And also, lastly, students are involved in collaborative assessment of their work with peers or the teacher. Also, when planning, I decide what effective assessment sound like ongoing feedback from me as a teacher to other students is taking place. Students are using the language of clear criteria to check their own progress. Also, students are using their student-friendly language when assessing their work. Also, when planning my when planning, students I usually take operate of students can take a proactive role in my learning in their learning. This is a core of a classroom that is student involved. I ensure that my own classroom is student centered. Not only when planning, when planning is about student centered. In order to do this effectively, students need to know and understand their learning targets and goals. Of course, the topics. Students must know exactly what they are learning and why they are learning that specific target or goal. It's also essential that I, as a teacher, guides and coaches the students so that they can develop ownership towards those learning targets and goals. Students must know exactly what they are looking in order to understand how this feedback effectively for their own learning. Also, I plan assessment with flexibility as students take more ownership over their own learning. As a teacher is involved more in coaching and guiding that is geared towards a learning destination that is clearly understood by both me as a teacher and the students. I believe assessment does not focus only on the content, it will focus on effective and responsive assessment as well. Responsive assessment is built into the plan. Record the observation of what students say and do will help me as a teacher to know what and how they are learning. When I'm planning around a big idea, the content, the process, and the assessment all take shape, but each can change as the learning unfolds. Each self-assessment process might either student or teacher in another direction. Also, when planning, I begin with the end in mind. An effective plan must have learning goals and target clearly defined. In addition to this, teacher must define what success looks like so that students can achieve their learning goal. In order to work towards student involved assessment, the identified learning goals and the defined success criteria need not only to be shared with the student, but also to be communicated in the student-friendly language so that there will be common understanding on how to achieve those learning goals. Also, when planning, I use diagnostic assessment to inform teaching because diagnostic assessment is designed to discover what children know and what they are able to do. I use the KWL organizer as a guide. The child organized around the three areas: what we already know, what we want to learn, and what we have learned. Using diagnostic assessment effectively enables the assessment process and they can begin to work, begin to take ownership over it. They can decide for themselves what they need to stop and review, where they need to attack a problem from different vantage points. Also, when planning, I develop a tracking system that works for me. The management challenge lies in tracking each student progress. All tracking should be done in relation to the learning goals and targets. Here are some tracking skills that I normally use as an experienced teacher. I post commonly used feedback comments on next steps or chat paper to use a reference for the students. This saves my time down every comment. The student who write down the comment on next step. I look for an effective way to track ancillary comment that is focused on specific learning target goals. Also, I teach students how to use their own student samples or exemplars to assess their own learning. I provide students with prompts on how to graph feedback and accept feedback. Also, when planning, I make sure that it have clear communication is vital. Student involved assessment is at the heart of effective assessment. Thus, clear communication with students and their parents or guidance is a key component to ensure that students are involved and engaged in their learning. This takes place at the beginning of the unit as well as during the unit. Communication clearly shares the criteria for success which students and parents or guidance in student-friendly language. Such communication can take various forms like sharing the learning targets of those, having student samples or student exemplars available, indicating the various terms for each learning. I believe with all this and what you have been given so far, I'm able to explain because one, how would the listening to the voice of my student affect my planning? Summarily, it will affect it because I need to know who they are, where they are, and let me know their own targets and goals, where they are going to, whether they can make it in life. That is about social emotional development. They're able to assess themselves. Is it true I'm learning? Is learning taking place? I believe with this, I've answered the question. Thank you.